Let's do it 8 tonight, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like kind of complicated.
It's so complicated, so many things going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's kind
I
of
did-
interesting that it's
Same,
odd.
I don't remember.
I just haven't watched all the videos, which is probably why I'm confused.
I watched the videos.
Yeah, there's like training video, wasn't super helpful. Yeah. Like, training videos on the.
I like that.
Because I'm like,
I am certified.
Nice.
How many times? I'm certified.
they sent you like a little.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little, I hung it up in my room. And certification, TQIL.
It's just like the beer game ones too. It's.
And you can hire like scientists and like HR groups.
So there's too many things in exchange, you know, I like it when like, you can only decide on like order quantity and.
Yeah, there's a lot of.
Okay, we're gonna live, just see how it goes.
That's been a reason.
There's one group in my class that went bankrupt, like we won that. I think they said-
On the practice run?
Yeah. Like, in my class, it's 2 years, they don't play that right for one. They got to leave, but, you know. It goes really well. I think the other side goes back in there, completely prices in the wrong direction.
Dominic, Mark,
This
can you
meeting,
hear me?
Mark, it should be- They didn't-
We can hear you.
Okay, was that Dominic or Mark?
That was Dominic, but I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Are you ready?
Yeah,
Yes.
Jared Smith, that's like, he had-
I can hear you.
said he was not very confident.
Can you hear me okay, talking through this mask? That's not a good presentation. Mark Cox, can you hear me clearly as I talk through this mask?
I can, but it's a little low.
A little muffled. How about now, Mark Cox?
You'll be fine.
Dominic, how do you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
20%. Straight up basketball school.
Good for that.
It's barely there. It is.
When you lose, that's just another game. Your season's not over.
And it's like you start expecting, you know, both phones and then you lose. That's coach. We played in the like 2 weeks ago. State of Michigan shut down all athletics. So we use like the new variant found like it's like in Michigan and then it's also found like some students at Michigan. Oh, that's probably. Yeah, our Mexicans in 10 days.
Okay, time to start. The Brightspace announcements, page 21. These 2 workbooks, copy paste with relative and absolute cell referencing, shell controls. There is a survey for each class starting at 4:30 today. It has only 2 questions. How did I go too fast or too slow or about right? And how much did you learn today? Nothing, a little, or many things. If you'll complete that, I'll try to respond to it by changing my pace and so forth. Last class, we saw the left text worksheet function, the right, the mid, and related worksheet functions. Today, we're going to talk about controls. And as part of a two-class group, we're going to talk about conditional formatting. Let me find overview, not for students motivate. Okay, this is a list box. If I select Jerry Harder, then all of his records are prominently highlighted. That's called conditional formatting. If I change the selection to Nancy, then all of her records are highlighted, and the title updates to total trade numbers by Nancy Heyer, and there is her total. If I select Moomin from the list box, his records are highlighted. The label changes to total trade numbers by Moomin, and the number updates. Michael LaPrey, etc. We're also going to look at a different type of control. This, I said, is a form control, a list box form control. I'm going to show you a checkbox. Motivation, solution. A checkbox which allows you to see or hide detail in an analysis. Look at column H as I deselect the checkbox and select it. Look at row 13 as I deselect and select the checkbox. Form controls, a checkbox. Form controls, a list box. And next class, we will get to conditional formatting. Classes 5 and 6, today and Wednesday, form controls. You will need to view the developer tab. I asked you to do that on the syllabus. We will look in particular at checkboxes, option buttons, and list boxes. Related but not testable in this class, in this course, are scroll bars and spin buttons. In every case, these form controls are linked to a cell that you specify to reflect your choice from the control. We'll get to conditional formatting next class, and we'll look at these 5 advanced worksheet functions. Today, we'll see the VLOOKUP, the if. We've seen that before. We'll see extensions of the if and the SUMIF. Wednesday, we'll see the offset and the indirect worksheet function. We're going to talk about copying and pasting with partially relative, partially absolute cell referencing. That is $A, no $1, or the opposite. No $A, $1. You should understand every word on this page 22. When you copy cells containing worksheet functions, the cell references in the paste area won't be the same as what you copied unless you use absolute references. Excel changes the references in position in relation to the position of the pasted cell. Relative cell references like no $A, no $1 are based on the relative position. If the cell containing the relative reference is copied, the relative reference changes. I think you know that, although the words may be confusing. Copy paste. I'm going to now the book copy paste with relative absolute cell references abbreviated. All I've said is that in C7, if you have a formula that sums the 4 cells above, and if you copy or drag, let me fill without formatting. If you copy in columns in C7, we had the sum of C 3 to 6. In D7, you have the sum of D 3 to 6. I think you know that already. All right, if you use absolute cell references, that's not true. Usually, but not always, the automatic adjustment of the references is an advantage. In C7, we have essentially the sum of the 4 cells above. When we copy it to the right, we get the sum of the 4 cells above D7, the 4 cells above E7. That's usually a big advantage. Let's look at an exception. Let's look at C15. The tip percent is 15%, and the meal cost varies from $10, $15, up to $100. $1.50 is correct. It's 15% of $10. Formula trace precedence. Copy it to the right, and I don't like what I see. Even Congress doesn't spend that much money. That's $212 quadrillion. That is not 15% of $100. So what went wrong? I correctly changed the reference to the meal cost from C14 to L14, but I did not want to multiply L14 by the previous dollar tip. I wanted the reference to the 15% to remain unchanged. I think most of you know that, but not everyone does, so let's go on. And I hit undo, and it took me to a different book. All right. The reference to B15 should be absolute. In copy paste with RELAB cell referencing, the formula, I'll turn it yellow, should have been in C15 equals C14 relative star B15 absolute. Copy to the right, and I think you can confirm in your head that 15% of $100 is in fact $15. Fully absolute cell referencing. Let's go back to the class pack. Relative cell referencing, like no $A, no $1, are based on the relative position of the cell containing the formula. If the cell containing the relative reference is copied and pasted to another cell, the relative cell reference changes. Absolute cell references always refer to that cell. Now, this was required to pass the background assessment test. If the cell containing the absolute reference is copied and pasted to another cell, the absolute cell reference stays the same. It does not adjust. Today's topic in green, mixed cell references, have an absolute column and a relative row, such as always A relative 1, or a relative column and an absolute row, such as relative A always 1. If the cell with the formula is copied and pasted to another cell, the relative reference changes, but the absolute reference stays the same. Relative, like A1, absolute, like $A, $1, and mixed have no meaning unless the cell containing them is copied. Sometimes we call this fully absolute. Sometimes we call this partially relative, partially absolute. All right, let's make sure we understand partially relative. My example, 1, and then an in-class problem. Put A23 near the top left of your screen. At these tip percentages, 10%, 11%, 12%, etc., through 20%, for these meal costs, $10, $15, through $100, the formula is always B relative 27 star relative C always 26. When I copy this down, the 27 will change to 28, 29, 30. But the 26 will not change because it's an absolute reference to row 26. When I copy the active cell C27 to the right, the B will not change, but the C will change to DEF. Let me clear out the paste area. And in either order, copy it down and to the right. I always spot check at least one cell whenever I do a copy and paste. For example, L37 is 20% of $100, $20. Let me give you some more background and then ask you to do a in-class problem for me. Let's put N as in November, 19 near the top left of your screen. The PMT worksheet function, the payment, returns the payment for a loan, for a car, for a house, for factory machinery. Returns the payment when you are planning to make constant payments at a constant interest rate. 5 arguments. The interest rate is the compounding rate per period, the interest rate per compounding period. N peer is the number of compounding periods. PV is the amount of the loan. The other 2 are optional, we won't look at them. FV, if at the end of the payments you want to have accumulated a positive balance, for example, for college tuition for your children, then you could use FV. That's normally defaulted to 0. The last argument, we will never change it. It is the end of year convention in finance. For example, annual percentage rate is 6%, 30 years, home $150,000. The monthly payment is minus the PMT. If you forget that, it's no big deal. Since 150,000 is positive, the payment will be negative. I don't want to look at the negative, so I put minus the PMT. The first argument is the rate, the interest rate per compounding period. It is 6% divided by 12 months in a year. The second argument is the number of payment periods, and peer. It is 034 years times 12 months in a year. The third argument is the PV, a reference to P34, which is 150,000. Let me give you 2 minutes to review this sheet, and then I'll call for a volunteer on how I need to change 07 so that it can be copied to the rest of the table, the rest of the range. I updated my Zoom software. I want to see if polling will work properly now. Everybody vote yes or no to a random question. Just pick yes or no arbitrarily. I want to see. Of course, I'm talking about Zoomers only. There are 32 of you remote. During the last review session, there were only a few of you, like 3. Joe, Bob, and Sue. And I said, come on, vote. I don't see you vote, Joe. And he said, yes, I did vote. And it was not reflected. I confirmed that bug with another faculty member who told me to upgrade my Zoom settings, and it would then fix the problem, but I'm not optimistic. I have 10 votes of yes. I think all 32 of you have voted yes or no. Nobody voted no. I think Zoom is not reflecting the various people. Maybe I need to update my Zoom settings on this computer. All right, I'll keep working on it. Back to the in-class problem, substrings lecture, I can close that. Don't save that. In 07, is the reference to 06 absolute, relative, or partial? Yes. Does O have a dollar sign in front of it? No. Does 6 have a dollar sign in front of it? Yes, it does. Relative O, always 6. So that when we copy to the right, O changes to P, Q, R, S, T. But as we copy down, the 6 does not change. N7, is N relative or absolute? Absolutely. And the 7 is relative and the N2 is fully absolute. I use the F4 key. That's ambiguous. F4 is a function key and F4 is a cell in column F, row 4. Learn how to toggle through the various combinations of relative and absolute. N2, dollar sign N, dollar sign 2. N dollar sign 2. Dollar sign N2. Command T for Max. Okay. Now let's copy that down and to the right. I just made those changes. I guess I hit undo some kind of way. Relative O, always 6. Always N, relative 7. $1.77 million is the correct display at the lower right corner in W17. 2 minutes for that. Let's go to shell controls, conditional formatting. Let's look at check boxes. So now I'm in the book. Shell controls conditional format, PC Mac. I did not update the title of the file. It's updated for the most recent Excel 365. The sheet is controls and conditional formatting. We're going to look at these three types of form controls, and then we're going to go to in-class problems. We won't get to conditional formatting until Wednesday. A checkbox is a control linked to a cell. Look at as I toggle on and off the checkbox that is floating over C4. Look at the linked cell H5. 5 or 10 minutes ago, I used the checkbox to control whether or not detail is displayed in a range. We're going to do that in just a few minutes. Checkbox 10 is linked to the cell beneath it. Toggles true and false. Let's insert a new checkbox. Develop a tab, controls group, insert. I am not talking about the insert tab of the ribbon. I'm talking about the developer tab of the ribbon, which you have to show. Controls group, insert icon. We will use only the first row. We won't consider ActiveX controls. They're more suitable for macros. We're going to look at checkboxes, option button, and list boxes. First of all, checkboxes. Draw it like any object. And then we need to do two things. Right-click it. Until you see the Format Control menu. Control tab and link the cell. I will use M6. So when I check the new control, the link cell toggles on and off, true, false, or yes, no. Let's change the text of checkbox 1. Let's change it to, do you want insurance? Right-click it. And then left-click it, and the cursor will start blinking. Insurance, misspelled, so I get to practice again. Yes, I want insurance. No, I don't want insurance. Check boxes. Notice that they can be set independently. Each of them can be true or false. They can all be true, they can all be false, or any combination. Option buttons, sometimes called radio buttons, like the radio on your car. If you're listening to one station and you push another button, you simultaneously deselect the selection you had been listening to and select the new one. For example, let me click truck. The three options are truck, TL, truckload, rail, that's option 2, and air, that's option 3. The link cell shows I chose the first of the three options. Let me click the second option. Rail, the link cell shows I chose the second one. Click the third one. When I click any of the radio buttons, I am simultaneously selecting the new one and deselecting the old one. By definition, only one can be selected. They are mutually exclusive. Let's add a new option button. It's going to float over the screen. Develop a tab, controls group, insert. Top row at the far right, option button. Let me put it to the right of the third option. Option button. Let's call it LTL. That's a supply chain expression for less than truckload. TL is a full truckload. If you're shipping thousands of pounds, you get the truckload discounted rate. If you're shipping only 100 pounds or 50 pounds, you have to pay more by the pound. So I've inserted a new fourth option. I've corrected the text to LTL, and the pink cell, when I select it, is 4. Notice that I did not have to format the control. When I added a new checkbox, I did need to format it. Let me show you that again. Develop a tab, controls group, insert, checkbox. I need to tell it which cell to link it to format it. Every time I insert a new checkbox, right click till I see format control, the cell link. I'll put it beneath it so it's clear. Each checkbox needs to be separately formatted because you can have all of them true or all of them false or any combination. But with an option button, they're all linked to the same cell. When you insert the first option button in a worksheet, you must tell it which cell it's linked to. But when you insert the second option button, it's automatically linked to the same cell. They are all linked to the same cell by definition. Let me do one more, then I'll insert a list box. I'm going to insert a new list box with the same input range. When I insert a checkbox, I have to give it the linked cell. When I insert an option button, I have to give it the linked cell the first time only. When I insert a list box, I have to give it the linked cell and the input range. Develop a tab, controls group, insert, hover until the balloon says list box, form control. Right click it until you see the desired menu. That's a 9. Right click it, there is the menu I want. Format control, do not assign a macro. In mod 4, I'll talk about macros. Format control, control tab, link it to the specified link cell, just as always. Excuse me. In addition, give it the input range. Alt print screen. These are the settings that I used. Input range M19 through 24. Link cell M28. So that when I select the second entry, think the list box is covering the cell. Yes, there it is. Look at M28. I'll turn it the next color just for your attention. Sometimes it's considered user-friendly to cover up the linked cell. Let me right and left click the user form and cover up the linked cell. Not for learning, but for using. For learning, we certainly want to see the linked cell. I chose the second entry. TNT is the fourth entry. EMS is the sixth entry. FedEx is the first entry. Let me give you a few minutes to review checkboxes, option buttons, and list boxes. It's really cold outside. So cold, I saw a wire with his hands in his own pockets. Let's go to in-class problems and do the first one. The sheet is in-class problems further to the right. I have for the months January through September, for the countries, the United States, Mexico, Canada, and so forth, sales volume with row sums and column sums. I'm asking you to insert a checkbox. Actually, I've already inserted a checkbox to save time because that's pretty straightforward. Let me housekeep. Use the checkbox, the existing one, to specify whether to show row totals. True means show the totals. Hint, if the cell linked to the checkbox is true, the value is the same formula. If the checkbox is checked, meaning if the linked cell is true, I want this to be the display, the sum of B to G4. What worksheet function have I taught you that displays one of two possible values, depending on a test? Sum if? I didn't actually teach you that one yet. But that's close. The if worksheet function. I want the formula in question to be equals if. A logical test. I'll give it a long run. K8 equals true. Comma. The sum, otherwise I want empty. Let me clean that up a little bit. I don't need that much space. That's what I'm looking for. Equals if, the logical test, K8 is true. That's, K8 is the cell linked to the checkbox. The value if true is the sum of B to G4. The value if false is open quote, close quote. I want to copy that down, so I will absolutely reference K8. Copy it down, and it's complete. Formula is equals if K8 equals true. In H4, if K8 is true, we show the sum of B to G4. In H4, we show the sum of B to G4 if K8 is true. You don't need to say if K8 equals true. Watch me, please. A logical test can simply be K8. K8 is an expression that evaluates to true or false because K8 is the cell linked to a checkbox. So K8 will always be true or false. The logical test can be simply equal. The logical test is K8. The formula is equals if K8, the sum, otherwise open close quote. I'll email you my solution file after class, after my 5:30 class ends. You'll see that I use a separate checkbox to control the display of the row 13 total, same concept. Let's go to the sheet useful functions, several sheets to the left. Let me see a show of hands. How many of you consider yourself pretty good at the V lookup worksheet function as opposed to the H lookup worksheet function? I see one hand. Okay, let's go to chat for Zoomers. Chat with me, give me a yes or no as yes if you're pretty comfortable with the VLOOKUP worksheet function. Nobody answered. Maybe you want the anonymity, you don't want to say yes. You don't have to answer no, you're not familiar with it. But if you are comfortable with the VLOOKUP worksheet function, please chat me a yes. Zoomers only. I see. I saw about 15, oh, maybe my screen hadn't updated. Okay, maybe it was, maybe we answered with the poll, oops, okay. Yes, mostly no, a second yes, a third yes. The usual 25 to 30%, something like that. So let's learn the VLOOKUP worksheet function. Here are the detailed descriptions, but let me teach it by illustrating it, and then, and only then, I'll read the directions. In a hypothetical course, if you get between 0 and 75 points, you get an F. 75 to 80 points is a B minus. You'll notice the old grading scheme not used for the MBAs. 80 to 85 is a B, 85 to 90 is an A minus, 90 or above is an A. Hypothetical course. Given this list of grades, numerical grades, presumably a big list, like all 61 that we have in the two merged sections. Joe got a 91, Mary got an 84, Bob got a 67, etc. A single formula in G23 that I just turned yellow returns the letter grade. Equals VLOOKUP of the numerical grade. VLOOKUP, V is for vertical. It has an analogous, a counterpart, HLOOKUP. H is for horizontal. And there's a brand new worksheet function, XLOOKUP, that we'll look at in a later class, which gives the best of both worlds, but it's only available in certain versions of Excel. G23 equals VLOOKUP of. What are you looking up? 91. Where are you looking it up? In the range B23 to C27, this gray range. Which column do you want to extract the result from? Column 2. So 91 is in the range 90 or above, that's an A. 84 lies between 80 and 85, that's a B. 67 is not big enough. 67 lies between 0 and 75, that's an F. 80 is right on the margin. 80 is between 75 and 80, and also 80 is between 80 and 85. 80 is a B. We'll talk about how to break ties in a little while. 94 and 93 are A's. Another example before we read the directions. Where Excel wants us to number the columns. Look at the gray range, IM, really I mean 23 through 29. I don't need the field titles. Column 1 is the leftmost column in the range. Column 2 is the next column. Column 3, 4, and 5. You can have as many columns as you want in your range. Our first example had only 2 columns. Our second example has 5 columns. The leftmost column must always be the compare values. That's a limitation. Actually, that limitation is relaxed in the new XLOOKUP function, but more on that in a few weeks. The leftmost column must be the compare values. We are checking to see in the grade example whether a particular numerical grade is between 0 and 75 or 75 to 80 or etc. In the second example, between 0 and 50 pounds shipped, we charge $20 per pound. We guarantee 1-day delivery. We will use truck to ship. And Al Jones is the CSR, customer service representative. 50 to 100, you get a discount on the per pound basis, but you pay more in total because you're shipping more weight. 50 to 100 is $19 per pound. 1-day truck Al Jones. 100 to 300 is only $18 per pound. 2 days truck Tim Rao is the CSR, etc. Let's look at the application of this, of the VLOOKUP. Let's look at the application of the VLOOKUP to this example. In the red border cell P23, we enter any number we want. The total cost is in P25. It involves VLOOKUP of P23. The table gives the dollars per pound. So the answer is P23 pounds multiplied by the dollars per pound. 101 lies in this interval. Let me mark it yellow. 101 in the red border lies between 100 and 300. So the answer is, well, the answer is either 18 or 2 or truck or Tim Rao, depending on what you want. I want the second column. I want the cost per pound. So the answer is 18 from the VLOOKUP multiplied by 101 is 1,818. Can you confirm that in your head? 101 times 18 is 1,818. Days, VLOOKUP of the weight, the red border cell, P26, VLOOKUP of P23, same range, comma 3. I want to extract the number of days that it takes to ship. Let me make some miscellaneous comments before I give you a few minutes. It is human nature to want to give the good news first, but you can't do that with the VLOOKUP. As a human being, I would rather not start off with the notion you're going to get an F if you get less than 75%, 75 points. You're going to get an F if you get less than 75. I'd rather start off with you're going to get an A if you get 90 or above, but you can't. The compare values have to be sorted ascending. Here they are not sorted ascending, they are sorted descending. So you can't use that. That's my first comment. They have to be sorted ascending. My second comment, well, now that we've seen it illustrated twice, let's read the directions. I'm back up to row 3. The VLOOKUP, V for vertical, looks up information stored in a vertical table. HLOOKUP, which we'll look at in a later class, uses a horizontal table. Standard form, VLOOKUP, what are you looking up? In the first example, I'm looking up the numerical grade from the student, and I want to convert it into a letter grade. In the second example, I'm looking up the shipment weight in pounds, and I want to return the cost per pound. In the third example, I'm looking up pounds shipped, and I want to return the days that we take to ship. The first argument is, what are you looking up? The second argument is, where are you looking it up? In this gray range, B23, C27, or in this other gray range, I23, M29. And the final argument is, which column do you want the result extracted from? The leftmost column are the compare values. 0, 75, 80, 85 are the compare values in the first example. In the second example, the compare values are 0, 50, 100, 300, etc. They have to be sorted ascending. VLOOKUP finds the largest compare value less than or equal to the lookup value. That's the technical way. I think there's a more intuitive way. Technically, largest less than or equal to is LL, which is my initials. But let's use some common sense. Somebody call out a number between 0 and 100.
56.
56. Is 0 less than or equal to 56? Yes. Is 75 less than or equal to 56? No. The largest compare value less than or equal to 56 is 0, therefore 56 is an F. Call out another number between 0 and 100, a bigger one.
82.
82. Is 0 less than or equal to 82? Yes. Is 0 less than or equal to 82? Yes. Is 75 less than or equal to 82? Yes. Is 80 less than or equal to 82? Yes. Is 85 or 90 less than or equal to 82? No. The answer is B. The largest compare value, less than or equal to. It's also fairly intuitive. If I offered you this grading scale, and if you got an 80, you would have a legitimate complaint if I gave you a B minus, because this says if you get an 80, you get a B. It also says if you get an 80, you get a B minus, but it has a heart, it's generous. Just like any reasonable professor, I think, would want to give the best grades that the dean's office allowed. A company, changing the example, a company, if you shipped exactly 100 pounds, do you have to pay the $19 rate or the $18 rate? I think the $18 rate. Let's be reasonable human beings and give the customer a break. Now, in another sense, Excel is heartless. But you cannot get around it directly, but it's trivial to get around it indirectly. If you got a 74.9999999, Excel would give you an F for the course. The largest compare value less than or equal to 74.99 is F. You did not meet 75 threshold. All you can do is don't look up the student's grade. Look up the student's grade +2. Or +3 or +1. So if you got a 74.9999, your grade +2 is 76.9999. Look up 76.999 and that's a B minus. If you got a 72.99999, 72.99 +2 is 74.99, that is an F. Let me give you 3 minutes to review the VLOOKUP. What did Jay-Z call his girlfriend before he married her? fiance, with an F, fiance. Answer these 4 questions for me. What is VLOOKUP of 10 in the range I-23 to M29, comma 2? It's tedious. I'm glad the VLOOKUP exists. What's the answer to the first question? VLOOKUP of 10 pounds in IM 2329. Somebody knows the answer.
20.
$20, yes. What is VLOOKUP of 100 pounds in the same range, comma 3, comma 3?
Two.
Yes, 2 days. What is VLOOKUP of 59 pounds in the same range? £59, comma 2.
19.
$19, yes. I hate to answer this over and over 1,000 times. I'd much rather write the VLOOKUP worksheet function and copy it down. Finally, VLOOKUP of 101, comma 3 is 2 days. Let me mention very briefly a ridiculous way, a ridiculous alternative. Let's put S7 near the top left of your screen. You could use a nested if, which is very confusing. If the grade is greater than or equal to 90, A. If that's not true, if the grade is greater than or equal to 85, A minus. If that's not true, if the grade is greater than or equal to 80, B. That's ridiculous. I won't spend any more class time on that. The analogous crummy approach for the shipping, if the weight is greater than or equal to 5,000, 12. If the weight is greater than or equal to 1,000, 14. It's hard just to get the parentheses balanced. Enough about that ridiculous approach. Next example is extensions of the if lookup worksheet function, of the extension of the if worksheet function. Reviewing very briefly, the if that we've seen equals if logical test, value if true, value if false. The number in column D is supposed to be no bigger than the number in column E. The logical test in F37 is equals if, D37 is less than or equal to F, D37 less than or equal to E37, quote, quote. The value of false, meaning there's a problem, is a bunch of exclamation points in quotes, copy down. The short form of the if, let me talk about that next. Equals if logical test, well, this is the traditional long form of the if. Equals if logical test. In this example, the value if true is true. The value if false is false. In that case, you can use the short form, which is simply equals logical test. You don't have to say the value of true. You have no control over the value of true. The value of true defaults to true. The value of false defaults to false. You can't change that if you choose to use the short form of the if. You don't even write if. The next extension I will look at is the if error and the is error. I invested 10 million and I got a return of 1.5 million. The percent return in N37 is 15%. That copies down, but I get a divide by zero error in one case. I did not invest anything in this time period, but I did invest in a previous time period. I'm dividing by zero, and I don't want to look at that ugly error. So I will use the if error worksheet function equals if error expression, comma, value if you do get an error. So presumably in almost every case, you will not get an error and Excel will look no further. It will just evaluate the expression. But in the rare cases where you do get an error, Excel will display whatever you want. Quote, 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 not in yet, close quote, quote, see a supervisor for this special case, whatever you want. The if error. The is error is a little more complex, but I want to illustrate it anyway. It is helpful to line it up. Equals if. The usual if. Next comes the logical test. Is error M37 over L37? That is the logical test. In English, you get an error when you do this. The value if true, you do get an error. You give it quote X quote or quote not applicable or quote NA. The value if false, you do not get an error. The same old expression. The is error is less efficient than the if error versus is error. The if error is usually more efficient, but the is error is sometimes helpful. Sometimes I don't really want to do this expression. I just want to know if it returns an error. For example, if a VLOOKUP returns an error, then if it is an error, let me hold off on why I would want to use the is error. It would take me a few minutes to explain, to motivate it. I've got one eye on the clock. I will motivate it in a future class. Summary, the short form of the if error, and the is error. Let me give you 3 minutes to look those over. I'd also like you to look at my example of the short form of the if, starting in U19. I got 2 answers using 2 methods. Perhaps my assistant got one answer and I got the other answer. So I have a big range of pairs of answers. I want to know if these 2 numbers are equal. I use the short form. In W21, I enter equals U21 equals V21. This is just for me. I don't need a real fancy display. Same answer, same answer, same answer. Oops, a different answer. And I can look for all the falses. Okay, continue. Let's go to the sum if worksheet function. Same sheet, useful functions. A45 on the top left. The sum if adds up certain numbers. It adds up cells in a range if a criterion passes. Sum if, believe it or not, Excel calls the first argument the range. That's about as unimaginative, as indescript as I can imagine. It's the label range, the range of labels. If these labels meet that criteria, then add up the corresponding numbers in this other range, the sum range. The first two ranges must be the same size. For example, we spend in gray $300 on UPS, $800 on FedEx, $500 on DHL, $100 on a separate UPS shipment. The total shipments is $32.30. I want to know how much we spent on UPS. I-56 equals the sum if the labels in C54 to C63 equal UPS, add up the corresponding number in B54 to B63. The first range and the last range have to be identical in size. They can each be a row, each be a column, each be a rectangular range, identical in size. Hard coding for teaching, better to put the label in a separate cell, as I do in G61. Continuing the example, let's put column R, R53 near the left of your screen. UPS. In S54, the sum if these labels equals R54, that's UPS, add up the range of numbers. 700 on UPS, that copies down so that in S55, we're comparing the labels to R55, FedEx, we spent 900. DHL, United States Postal Service, TNT. Let me go to motivate sum if. I have a list of sales reps, Andy, Christina, Shannon, Rob, Bob, and so forth. I have three ways to add up the numbers. Andy's sales were the sum were equal to B2 plus B7, not B8, not B9, B10, B15. I think you agree that's error prone. A similar separate formula for Bob, a separate formula for Christina. Equally naive is the sum worksheet function of this cell, but not that cell, this cell and not that cell. The sum if is more robust. Imagine a large example in which your boss came to you and said, oops, I found a typo. You see this, Rob, right here in A5, that was a mistake. It's supposed to be Bob. The naive approach does not update. You would have to dig into the formula and add a new term, B5, and possibly delete another term. In a large example, of course, that's tedious. Notice right in here, Bob, the naive 1 approach gives the wrong answer. The naive 2 approach gives the wrong answer. The sum if approach doesn't have to be updated at all. You just change the data and the answers appear instantly. Now that I've added 571, there's the new answer. Let me undo the change and show you also that if you sort, let's sort by sales rep. So here are all the Andys, here are all the Bobs. The naive approach gives wrong answers. The answer is still 3,000 for Andy, the sum of all of these. Here's an image of what I started with to confirm that in case you want to reset from scratch. The sum if is very robust, much less error prone. All right, let's go back to useful functions and talk about a more complex version. I'll give you 2 minutes first, actually. I'll give you 2 minutes to review what I've said. Do you know what an engineer's natural method of birth control is? His personality. I hope I don't offend any engineers. I have a degree in engineering. It's all a joke. An opportunity to laugh or to cry depending on the context. Let's look a little more carefully. In almost every case with the sum if, not almost every case, 95%, you mean equal in your comparison. You could be asking if the label is larger than a threshold or smaller than a threshold. Let's look at the 6 comparison operators. I'm in R64. Less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, not equal to, and equal. If you mean for any one of these other comparison operators, you have to put the operator in quotes and concatenate it with a cell threshold. The only alternative is hard coding. Look at that ridiculously large font. Quote greater than or equal to A1, larger than whatever is in A1, a generic form. A1 is a generic example. Let's work some problems. Let's put AH20 near the top left of your screen, actually AH18. I have data showing that in year 2, property ID, that's irrelevant, sold for $194,000 and the commission was $9,700. In year 3, we had a sale of $614,000, commission 55. What's the total commissions on property values at least equal to 250K? Equals the sum if. The last argument is the commissions. The first argument is the labels, property values. I want to select the range of values. I prefer to select it bottom to top rather than top to bottom. Let me do a control down arrow without the shift. Mac users command down arrow to get to the bottom of the range. Then Control Shift up arrow, fine tune, and now I can see my directions by selecting the range bottom to top. The sum if these labels at least equal to AM 18, I don't feel like answering such a complex question all at once. Just like I don't feel like writing page 1 and 2 of a 2-page report simultaneously. I'm gonna write page 1 first, and then I'm gonna write page 2. I don't wanna answer the question at least equal to AM 18. I'll answer a simpler version. Equal to AM 18, comma, and now I'll go with the commissions. To the bottom of the range, shift to the top of the range. The answer to the preliminary form of the question is 22.5. That is not correct. I need to extend this. The real question are if these property values greater than or equal to, quote, greater than or equal to, quote, ampersand AM 18. And there is the real answer, 5,326,000. Notice I did not attempt to create that formula at once. I broke it into steps. The sum if these labels, total commissions on property values at least equal to, property values are in effect labels. I don't want the first record because 194 is not big enough. I do want the second record because 614 is big enough. Stop that. My mouse button is stuck. I don't want this record. That's too small. I don't want this record. I don't want this record. I don't want this record. 5,325. Excuse me, 5,326. The next one, total commissions on property sold on or before year 2 equals sum if the years are the labels. Select anywhere in column H, excuse me, anywhere in column AH. Control down arrow, shift control up arrow. And now I've selected the range and I can see the directions, comma, on or before year 2. I don't feel like that complex concatenation, so I'm going to click on AM 19. That means sold during year 2. Control down arrow, control up arrow. And my incorrect answer is 1 million plus. But significantly, there is no syntax error. The commas are all in the right place. The closed parentheses are all in the right place. Quote, less than or equal to, quote, ampersand. The answer is 2 million. There are my formulas. One more minute, and then we'll do the final in-class problem. Clearly, you need to put in at least an hour after class to review those VLOOKUP, sum if. In-class problem, the second one. Enter the weight of your package in the red border, you put a numerical value. Then you indicate whether you just specified pounds or kilograms. The option buttons are already set up. Pounds is the first option. Kilograms is the second option. Specify whether or not you want to insure shipping of your package. Yes, insure it. Oh, the checkbox is already set up. True, false. Insurance is going to add 10%. I refer to J41. The shipment cost is VLOOKUP of C24, that's the red border cell, in the gray range, blue gray range, I to K, comma 3. You think about what needs to be correct, what needs to be changed. I'll give you a hint. Everything to the right of the green cells is just fine. You think about whether these two are correct. Let me show you my thoughts. I'll be emailing you this. I've got one eye on the clock. We needed to change C37. In the VLOOKUP, the compare values must be at the left. If the weight is in pounds, then this blue-gray range is correct. If the weight is in kilograms, we need to refer to the range J26 through K39 because the compare values have to be at the left. So the shipment cost is if the cell linked to the option button is 1, then you VLOOKUP C24 in the big gray range IK, comma 3. If the linked cell is not 1, then it must be 2. You VLOOKUP the very same C24 in the range JK, comma 2. Look at my cell comment with the large font, I and J, 3 and 2. The only change I made really was in that one formula. The only change. Is this an alternate form? Look at C39, which is the sum of C37 to C38, and C41, which does not use a worksheet function. It uses the plus operator. Are those equivalent? Not really, not always. If everything is numeric, they are equivalent. But let's not select insurance, so that one of the numbers, one of the cells we're adding contains non-numeric invalid text. The sum worksheet function ignores invalid text. The plus operator gives you an error specifying that somewhere in your range of data, you have non-numeric values. That can actually be advantageous. For example, it's easy enough to make a mistake if you enter in very many numbers to enter L0. I meant to enter 10. I meant to enter 10 for 10, but I entered L0. I meant to enter 2000, but I entered 2000. Let me say 20. I meant to enter 2 and a 0, I entered 20. I've been living in Germany or France for so long, I meant to enter 2.5, but I entered 2,5. The typical decimal separator, the comma instead of the period. Those are all invalid numbers and we'd like to know that. Okay, what did we learn today? Check boxes, option buttons, sometimes called radio buttons on the Windows, actually officially called, formally called radio buttons on the Mac. Because in your car, if you listen in to one radio station and you push another button, you simultaneously deselect the old station and select the new station. And list boxes. We have not yet gotten to conditional formatting. We saw the VLOOKUP worksheet function. It's so much superior to the nested ifs. We saw the sum if, the extensions of the if, the short form, the if error, the is error. We did not yet get to the offset. Okay, folks, I will see you on Wednesday. Take the quiz, please, the survey, please. Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? Did you learn anything? Annie Peterson, are you still there?